How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Envision Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Portillo, joined as always by my lovely co-host and wife, Lynn Portillo.
Hey, guys.
Welcome back. We're excited to have everyone back. We hope everyone went out last week and shattered your limits and then ascended. We hope everyone had a blessed week and that we hope everyone had a good week, essentially, is what I'm trying to say there. Lynn, how was your week?
It's been a good week. I've gotten to see a lot of family I don't normally see.
Okay.
I have family in town for a sad reason.
Okay.
For a funeral. But it has been really nice that, you're getting time with family members that you rarely see. Some I haven't seen in years. So it's a really good opportunity. It's sad that that's always what brings family together. It makes you appreciate time when you lose someone. But I've just been enjoying taking my time with them.
Okay, so let me pause there and say, would you say, how do I want to ask this? Would you say that in types of settings like this, that we realize more or realize less that, hopefully this question makes sense, but in situations like this, why do we wait for situations like this to get together as a family? That's my question.
I don't think we mean to wait. I think we just get caught up in what we think is important,
okay,
which is money, job, chores, career. And when something sudden like this happens where it is unexpected, it's not someone just sick and kind of on a downhill slant. When it's those sudden things, it kind of hits us and we have that realization, money, you need it to survive, but it's not the biggest thing. Career, you do it because you enjoy it, but it's not the most important thing. It's the people around you, and when you lose someone, you get that realization, I can lose this person at any moment, and that's what gives us that immediate perspective. But what I've noticed, because I've lost a lot of people, you kind of revert back to, this is more important, gotta keep working, gotta keep doing this, and it takes, over and over again, I feel, for us to realize, hey, time is the most important thing. Time with your loved ones is the most important thing.
Agreed. I would, and the reason I ask that is because you just mentioned it, you've lost more people in your life than I have. I admit
Probably
that.
Lost more people in my life than a lot of normal people.
Possibly. But at least within your family, friends, you have experienced a lot of death. And for me, that's not necessarily the case. I've been very blessed and was able to meet my great-grandparents just like Rhaegar just met his great-grandparents. I was able to meet my great-grandparents on both sides, my mom's side, my dad's side. Both my grandparents on both my parents' sides are still alive. I still have my parents and, my siblings. And so I definitely have been blessed in that sense, and I'm very grateful. And what I want to bring up is you mentioned there was a passing in your family, and I'll let you speak on that, so I won't necessarily jump into it, but I'll say it this way. The reason I asked that question is because it's what I explained in an earlier episode that I went through. That what you're saying there is that why does it take for a tragic family or life event to happen to get together with people that you love, with family, with friends, with whomever? Why does it take a tragic event to happen to get together? And for me, that was something that I've had to cope with or live with or overcome, if you will. Definitely a sense of guilt, I'll be honest, when my uncle passed a couple years ago. Because, I mentioned it in a previous episode, so I won't go too into detail, but I prioritized everything you just said for so long in my life. Career, money, school, my own ambitions. And although all of those things are healthy, in my opinion, because it's what it may give your life purpose to try and achieve, a certain spot in your career or make as much money or complete a school degree. Although those aren't bad ambitions to go after, they shouldn't come at the cost of not prioritizing or making time for the people who are important to you. And for me, for 10 years, I would tell my family that I'm going to go visit. I'm going to go see you guys. I can't wait to see you guys anytime we get on a phone call. But I never made that priority. And then it took my uncle passing for me to say, whoa, what just happened in my life? I literally was just talking to him not too long ago.
Yeah.
And then I lived with that guilt, with that regret, with that remorse, because I knew I could have made the time. I just didn't prioritize the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to touch on one other point that you mentioned, is that when events like this happen, we get together and we say, hey, let's not wait for something like this for us to get together again. Let's do this. Let's stay in touch. Let's do that. Let's make the effort. And I think we do. At the beginning, we start out with the intention of making the effort to stay connected or to get together again. But then life happens and we go back to our normal routine, and sometimes that priority that we made or that we should make as a priority ends up not being a priority anymore, or drops down in the list of priorities in our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the struggle. And I think that is the question, the question to ask, and to find an answer to. Find that balance, find that rhythm of knowing when to make that time.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it really comes down to just lifestyles nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
really, because I think if we lived a slower lifestyle where it's not so busy, you're working all day, then you come home and you have like a lot of extracurriculars, kids doing sports, you doing this, different hobbies, it gets busy to where it's just this thing, then this thing, then this thing, then this thing, and you're kind of marking off a list.
Correct.
Whereas if we had time and prioritize that, we would have more laid back time where we do make, I can go over here for dinner tonight. I don't have anything going, I can do this. And I think that kind of relates a lot to that, because I definitely notice that I am really being intentional with my time with my family here now. I'm not the most social person, but because I have lost a lot of people, I've really learned that you do need to make time for them, because you just never know. And I don't want to have regrets, because I have regrets with some family members. I've really worked to improve that, and a lot of them nowadays I wouldn't have regrets, but from when I was younger, definitely have regrets. Ended some interactions on a really bad note, and then sudden deaths happen, and I will always have to live with that. So I've been having to really prioritize my time and jump all over the place, especially with having Rhaegar.
Correct.
To just, even if it's an hour here, an hour there, I'm trying to make sure I see everyone and take that time. But it's because our lifestyle, it's busy. We do have a lot of stuff going on. We're hopping back and forth. We want to do and accomplish a lot of things. And I think that just kind of comes with lifestyle nowadays, where you have to be so intentional with prioritizing that time compared to, I don't know if it's like the older days, because I wasn't back then, but hearing my grandma Fallon talk on how much they spent time with family, yes, she was busy and it was a different time, but they had that time because the focus was, she lived during the Depression. It was eating, wanting food, like
survival.
Finding a job, survival. And so you have different priorities and a different perspective on life when your job is to survive and be with the ones you love, because you don't know if they could die from being malnourished or all the things like wars that are going on at that time too. Yeah. So nowadays we kind of are more comfortable and we get complacent and we don't realize that those kind of things can still happen.
Yeah, I agree. I would say that the priorities and the times for sure have changed from your grandma's time and the priorities then to now. And a lot of it, I would say, has to deal with just the advancements that have happened in civilization, with technology and the internet and all this stuff. It makes it easier in terms of connecting with people, staying in touch, texting, video chatting, phone calls. So it makes it easier, but then it also has its cons to it. If you get caught, scrolling, if you it could be a distraction. That's what I was trying to say. And so you have to, I guess it's like a necessary evil kind of thing, but you have to know how to manage that time and manage those boundaries to ensure that you get whatever you need to get done in your life and accomplish the things that you want to accomplish, but still make time for those people that you care about, the people that you love.
Like use that technology to your advantage. Yeah. Like they say with money, you want to use money as a tool and not have it consume you. So when we want to invest in stuff, we're using it as a tool and not being like, I just want to go shopping. So we need to use the technology.
I've learned.
We've both learned.
I've learned.
we want to that will be another story later when we go to finances, but we want to use that technology to our advantage. Like when we lived in Texas,
Yeah.
I FaceTime my parents
Every
every
day.
single day, multiple times a day, and that was the only way I could be comfortable and happy and content that I was keeping that connection. Because
Correct.
when I didn't FaceTime them one day, it was weird. It
Yeah.
became a routine. But if I didn't have FaceTime, we would just have our forms of letters, writing, because we wrote letters too, and phone calls. But it's harder to do a phone call. It's not the same, you know, sometimes depending. So just being able to utilize even FaceTime was the one thing that really helped me keep connected just with my parents, who obviously those are like the closest family members. So I want to make sure I take full advantage of any time I can get with them.
Correct.
So that's just like an example, I guess, of utilizing that technology.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you definitely use it well. While we were in Texas, you made it a priority to interact with them, and I think it made the transition from moving from Nevada to Texas easier for you because you had never moved away from home.
Yeah.
For me, I had moved away from home a couple of times for different jobs and you know, just for my own life, but so I guess it was easier for me.
Yeah.
But to a point that you made about utilizing technology or making those being intentional in making those connections with family or friends. I remember one of the summer jobs that I had was in a different part of the state, and it was like a 5.5 hour drive. But that was my first taste of freedom, if you want to call, you know, if we can call it that. It was freedom.
It was.
Well, my first taste of freedom. But I told myself, hey, I'm going to prioritize calling my parents and reaching out and just checking in because I knew I'm their oldest child. So I was leaving the nest in a sense, and I was hoping that they'd miss me. So I was like, you know what, let me make that priority. But I didn't. I got wrapped up in my own world. I got wrapped up in my own routine and agenda of my career being out there.
And just text me.
We were dating at that time, and so yeah, I didn't check in as much as I do now, right? I would say. And the funny thing with that, or I guess not funny depending on how you look at it, is
might not be funny to me.
The one time I called, not the one time, but the first time I should say that I called my mom and my dad. I'm bilingual. I was English is my second language. I grew up in a Spanish household, so mainly primarily speak Spanish. Both my parents speak English, but we primarily speak Spanish. And as I was having a conversation with my mom, I remember just getting stuck on words that I've known my entire life, but I hadn't practiced the language in 3 weeks, and I was like, whoa. And then I had to switch it to Spanglish, so I would go Spanish, then English, Spanish. And you could tell my mom, I think at one point she did call me out. She goes, did you forget Spanish or what? And I was like, yeah. And so that's where I learned. I think I've said this, but that's if you don't use it, you lose it. I really learned that. And so I know for you, when we go see my family members in Mexico, or we see my family members in here and we're speaking in Spanish, you understand it, you can read it, but we've been together 11 years now, for almost 12. You've had to endure for a decade and a year the question of why don't you know Spanish yet? And it's partly my fault. I'll say that I don't practice enough with you like I should. But yeah, if you took Spanish for many years and you were able to, you do speak it. You
can read it.
You can read it. You can write it, but you can speak it if you're in the environment fairly well. But I do realize that, or I have noticed that it'll take you a couple days to get adjusted and find the words again.
Yeah.
And
then
how to
I
have that
remember the
communication.
vocabulary and stuff.
Yeah.
But that's just a good point because it shows that if you're not making these people a priority, you lose those connections, whether it be the language, dialect, even just knowing about the person if you're not making it a priority. So then, honestly, if you're not keeping those connections and something were to happen and you're not appreciating that time, it's like somewhat like a surreal experience, like a stranger passing away. Like you knew them, but you knew past them because you weren't intentional with your time in the present.
Correct.
So you didn't know, like going to a funeral and you love this person, but you were never intentional with your time, and you're hearing all these people talk about them, you're just like, I didn't know that, and you could have, but you didn't take the time to do it.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah, I can see that being hard. I know I've gone to a couple funerals of friends and family that we were close at one point, but then through the years we lost connections. And And when I found out about their passing, I attended one of the funerals, and it it was interesting because I felt the emotion that you're talking about. I felt the emotion of, did I not spend enough time? Did I not reach out enough? Did I not? Guilt. We'll call it what it is, guilt. And then there's some funerals that I had not attended that I should have, and that's another form of guilt and another form of regret that I've carried, and I've had to work through because, again, I've prioritized other things when I've realized now that I'm older, it doesn't take much of your time to go and give your condolences or reach out or just make that connection, because the most important thing that I learned is that at one point in time, whether it was brief or whether it was a long time, at one point in time, that person or that group of people were important to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I was immature in my age, and I didn't realize that until I got much older. And so now I try and look at things from a different perspective and a different lens.
And all of this has taught me that even just sending that text message of reaching out, it takes 2 seconds. Like especially with all the fancy swiping texting you can do now, and
Or voice notes, yeah.
Voice notes, or even just the voice to text. If you're debating, should I reach out to them? Just do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, even if it might be a negative interaction, it end up being like that, or they don't respond or anything. You did your due diligence, and it will, in a selfish way, it will make you feel better, because you don't want to have to live with that, because the person who passes, they're hopefully, living it up, comfortable and happy with God and Jesus, but you're the one who has to keep living with that.
Yeah, I was going to say there is no sadness in heaven, so we know that they are living it up. Yeah. They don't even miss us, so.
No, they're just looking down on us, and they're probably feeling like, don't feel bad, it's okay, I'm fine. But to us, we're not going to know that. We're not going to accept that, especially when you're in mourning. Correct. So it's harder on you, and then sometimes it's hard to pick yourself up from that and Correct. Then appreciate those currently. So it's just a good perspective of, we talked about priorities in our previous episode, but it can happen in a bunch of different ways. So we talked about God, marriage, and children, but also making priorities for others that are really important to you, because you just need to keep in mind that you just don't know what God has planned for others.
Yeah, I agree. And that's deep. So if I may, let me ask you one question, because I gave my perspective on the regrets and different things that I've experienced through passing of loved ones or friends and not making that time. You mentioned this earlier, so I want to come full circle. How have you dealt with that, coped with it? How have you moved forward, knowing after the fact that you could have spent more time but you didn't, or the connection was lost, and then this happened, and then now you don't necessarily have that opportunity to talk to them face to face again?
Yeah, well, I've had it in different instances with different relations. So I think you also need to take in consideration, like, there's a difference between family and friends and that sort of thing. So one of the first ones I could think of that definitely have some regrets about, but I was young, so I also have to kind of give myself grace of that, is I had a cousin who passed away really young, right before his birthday, I believe, or right after. And we had a birthday party at my grandma's house, and he's teasing me as his little cousin. I was about 8 years old, and the last thing I said was, "I hate you." He passed away like 3 days later, super fast. So when you think of that as an 8-year-old, you're just like, oh my gosh, what happened? But then later down the road is when I kind of acknowledged that final interaction. And for me, dealing with it, obviously it was really hard in the beginning, because at that point I hadn't lost as many people. I still had, by that age, I've lost quite a few family members to cancer and stuff, but it's kind of one of those things where kind of got me into writing, I guess, because that's how I would let out those feelings. And then also I just turned it around with other family members, especially really taking time to spend with my aunt, who that was her son that she lost, and my cousins, and appreciating their time, and my other cousins. And then another one was a friend who we always texted. We sent each other gifts via the mail, letters, you even have phone calls and stuff. And I slowly, I guess, starting to date you, you kind of want to respect that boundary because of gender. And then we're just moving in different paths in life, you know? They're traveling, doing different things, and I'm at home going to school, starting a relationship, and you grow apart even though you're so close. You still know everything about each other and you have this really close friendship, but then you kind of just back off as your lives are changing.
Yeah.
And he was very, very young, joined the service, and died in a helicopter accident while on a night raid in the other countries. I don't know where. And that really hit me because it was also right when Herrick had passed too, like 3 days before Herrick had passed.
Which Herrick is your dog?
Yes, Herrick is my dog who lived 15 years. But that was really hard because I have like letters still kept from him even. He's got me birthday gifts, and just it was a really close relationship we developed through Aikido. And the fact that I kind of moved away from that friendship, like I was the one who kind of stopped reaching out.
Yeah.
It stinks when you see like, oh, he was married, he was happy, he didn't live that far from us, and like he in terms of our location, and I just didn't prioritize our friendship anymore. You know, like I said, you find different priorities, and so the fact that you would never think someone that young would be in an accident like that. It just doesn't, you don't comprehend what war can do either. So even though we're not in the past anymore like my grandma, there's still active war going on all right now, and you just don't realize how that can affect us here at home. So thank you just for everyone who serves out there and those who have served.
Thank you.
But that was also another one that I still can hold regrets about.
Yeah.
And I think just coming to terms with the fact that I need to change for other friends, so I'm way more intentional with just communicating and keeping that communication consistently with friends, even if it's just a text message or like an hour walk in the park with them, any kind of way to know that I was appreciating them while they were here and letting them know the impact they make on my life is something I've done after that instance to not have to have that regrets with others.
Yeah, that makes sense. I really appreciate you sharing that perspective and sharing your point of view because, as we mentioned at the beginning, you definitely have experienced more loss in your lifetime than I have. And I know that at one point when we first started dating, I think you had made the comment that you're pretty numb to death now. And for better or for worse, I think that what you've experienced, I can see why that comment. I can see why you feel that way because, especially at a young age, as you mentioned, you've had to see family members, friends pass away, and at that age, you may not process that time frame as you process it now, and you process the either last interaction or what was said or how the relationship was left. And so, I think that the older we get, you know, I guess that would be the assumption, right? The older you get, the more death you will experience because you're getting older. People around you are getting older also, and so they, you know, some people go sooner than others. But I think that what I've learned is to appreciate the moments. Right? Appreciate the moments and be intentional about being in the present, and don't focus so much on the past because it's easier said than done, of course. But if you focus so much on the past, you're always going to find something that you could have done differently. You're always going to find something that you could have improved or that you could have changed or that you could have said. And the reality is we don't know when someone is going to pass. We don't know when someone is no longer going to be here with us.
You really don't. Those two examples were sudden, my uncle, that was a sudden death too. So these were just examples of sudden deaths that you just never
that I don't have time to prepare for. So I think that for myself, I have not experienced death nearly as much as you have, but I definitely choose. I think it's important, choosing. I choose to cling on and remember the good memories over the bad memories, because you're gonna have bad memories with any person. With my parents, there's times that we disagreed, and I could consider it a bad memory. They could consider it just being my parents and being strict, or being well, okay, they weren't strict, but being being parents. And so I choose to remember the good times. I choose to remember the now, the present. Reminisce on the past, yes, to learn from the past, but focus more on the present while keeping an eye towards the future. That's what I like to do.
That's a good perspective. So is that something that you've learned through kind of, you've been along with me through a lot of the different deaths. So I want to get like your perspective on just death in general. I think that's important for you to share, because I was kind of talking through my experiences, and since you haven't experienced it personally on your side much, how has it been kind of getting that secondhand experience?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I would say I've had this conversation with you in the past. I look at death differently. I don't know why. Honestly, I don't know why. My dad looks at death for what it is, and I don't want to say he doesn't show emotion, because I do believe he feels, but he's very good about just, I don't know, I don't know how to explain it. Processing it, but I don't know how to explain it because I've never asked him the question. But my dad has had siblings pass, family members pass. And since I was little, since I could recall, there's been very, very few times that I've ever seen my dad cry. And it's important why I bring up my dad. There's been few times that I see my dad cry for death in the family, or passing of a friend, or something tragic happening in his life, or good graduations, from like when I graduated high school, college. My brother graduated high school. My sister's getting close to graduating high school. I've seen him be excited, of course, but I've never seen him be emotional. Like, I can count probably on less than the fingers I have in my hand the times that I have seen my dad emotional. And so the reason I bring him up is because that's what I saw, right? I saw him be very real, be a realist with death, and understand that people are in a better place who pass away, and we shouldn't cry. We should rejoice, and we should be happy for the time we had with them, is essentially what it would say to me. And so I've been around, as you mentioned, funerals in your family, funerals in my family, and our friends. We've seen that. And I can say I've not cried. And at times I do feel weird about it. It makes me feel less human. It makes me feel less empathetic. You've kind of had to help me through that and say, we all process death differently. And just because you process it different from the way I process it doesn't mean that you're not mourning, doesn't mean that you're not hurting, doesn't mean that you're not sad. In fact, I'm lying. I'm going to call myself out. The only time I've cried, this is what makes me feel hypocritical. The only time I've cried is really when our dogs have passed away.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel, I don't even know how to explain it. It makes me feel like I value an animal's life more than I value a human life, and that's not necessarily what I'm trying to say, or that I feel, or that I look at it that way, but it's just, that's how I feel at times, because when people have died in our lives, I'm very quick to process and say, okay, I understand, and I actually stop and reflect and think about life in that moment. And I realize that cars are still going by, the world is still turning, the sun's still shining, or the moon is up, or whatever, but life is continuing, is what I'm trying to say. And so I recognize that. And so that's why I don't spend too much time dwelling on death, or dwelling on people who are no longer with us. I choose to remember the good times, choose to remember the fun times, the funny interactions, even with our dogs who have passed away. I know with our dog that passed away, the most recent, that one was hard for me because he was my oldest dog, similar to what Lynn was saying. For Herrick, DOG, who was my dog, get it? Play on words, DOG.
But it wasn't
So
spelled D-O-G.
it wasn't spelled like letter D, letter O, letter G. But that was his name, and that was a funny name, and we loved it, and he loved it. And he was a great dog, very loyal dog. Um, so for his death, it was rough because Rhaegar was born 2 days before. Lynn and I are literally in the hospital. She's recovering. Our son's getting out of the NICU. He had a little bit of gunk in his lungs when he was born, so they had to take him and admit him into the NICU, which was a whole separate conversation. That was Rhaegar's birth, which we'll talk about at a different time. Rhaegar's birth was the longest draining. It was the longest day of my life. I was mentally drained. I was emotionally drained. I was physically drained, and that's a whole different conversation. But
it just wasn't good timing, which death never is.
Correct. And so I remember just feeling a mix of emotions that my son's born, but at the same time he's in the NICU, and thankfully it wasn't anything too severe. The doctors felt really confident that everything was gonna turn out fine. They said this happens from time to time, so we're definitely blessed in the sense that we didn't go through what a lot of other parents go through that we know or that we've heard of. And so we're very fortunate and very blessed, and we give all the glory to God for that. But still, 2 days after his birth, I get a phone call from my brother who was watching our dogs, and he's he's emotional, and he says, "Hey, like I think Diogi just died." And I was like, "Well, what happened?" And he explains the scenario, and I just was at a loss for words. Like, I think I cried. But I think I cried more out of just there was so much going on that I was the only avenue I had was to just let it all out. And so I remember, and you please keep me honest here, I remember composing myself quickly. Like, I realized that, hey, like, I have to be the leader here, and I have to be the strong person and kind of pull my weight. And so I wiped the tears off, and I got back on the phone, and I said, hey, here's what we need to do. It's the weekend, so it's gonna be, you're not gonna be able to get him into the vet. You're gonna have to go to the emergency vet. And so we called one around, and the one that we went to before, or we've gone to in the past, was closed, so we had to go to a different one. And thankfully one of our friends works there that we had forgotten about, that she worked there. And then once my brother got there with DOG, they recognized each other, and she was able to help him out, which is awesome, and I'm very grateful for that. But anyways, I just remember having to process all that emotion so quickly, and having to also lead and have my brother comfort my brother and my sister from 2,000 plus miles away as I'm having a baby, as my wife's recovering, and there's just so many different things. And so how it all relates is that, well, one, my dog had passed, but two, it's just I had to realize that life continues, right? And so that's, I think, the ace up my sleeve, if you want to call it that, where I don't spend a lot of time dwelling or put myself mentally in like a hole, or be sad or be in mourning a lot, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I focus more on realizing that, hey, this is a part of life, understanding that, accepting that, and then remembering the good times, and little by little moving forward. I hope all of that makes sense.
No, I think that's a really good perspective, and it's important because the mourning part is all, honestly, selfishly on our side.
Yeah.
It's us processing the change that we're no longer going to have that person there.
Yeah.
Because you've seen me with all my grandparents and those that have been declining. So those were deaths that we knew were coming. Took a few weeks, whether it was cancer or heart attack, stuff like that. Like, I was able to be there, or just, old age, like Grandma Fallon. When they're there and they're dying, I specifically, but Alex isn't either, we are not crying. We are smiling. We are there helping them, supporting them, visiting with them, giving them like whatever comfort they need. And I would say that I've gotten relatively good at that. Like, most of the people around us are crying and upset and struggling to keep them company, like just sitting by their bedside and talking, because you know the end result. Everyone knows the end result, but you have to be able to be supportive and let them, be comfortable and get to that place of acceptance. For us doing that is really important, that we are not having those tears. That's something that if we do have them, it's private and it's afterwards, because the mourning and stuff is all really us processing the emotion, but they are content and comfortable. You get that medicine to not be in pain, to where you can settle into death, and it's us that we're kind of self-centered and be like, now it's time to cry, and we're upset because we don't get to be with them. So you don't have that perception. You aren't feeling like, oh, I'm lost them. Like, what am I going to do? My life's over now because they're not here. You're looking already at the positive side of it and have those realizations that, yes, life goes on, but also you're acknowledging they had a great life. Yeah. Look at all these positive things, instead of kind of going down that rabbit hole of regret, if you have any guilt, if you have any just sadness of not having them by your side, which is all kind of, a lot of people process death that way, which is, it's okay, and everyone process it how they need to, but it is the selfish side of that, because the other person, you want to make sure they're comfortable and happy and good as they go. And that's been something that we've also experienced from my side with losing certain people, is that was our goal and how we made it through it, I feel.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you touched on something that's very important that I want to circle back real quick to. And I think that regardless whether it's sudden, someone that passes away sudden, or you see a progressive decline. You see a decline. I think that a lot of times we can find ourselves in a position of selfishness, like you said, and the mourning or the emotions that come out in that time really come out of guilt. I mean, I'm just going to say what it is. Yeah. And I think they come out of guilt because either a lot of time has gone by that you haven't spoken to each other, or something happened in the past that has caused friction or caused distancing or caused something for you're not the relationship isn't as strong anymore. And there's so many other things that it can be, but I think that really it comes out of guilt, and it comes out of not accepting that, if it's sudden, not accepting that it happened, you didn't have a chance to maybe apologize or amend those relationships. But if it's declining, it could be many things. It could be realizing that the time was lost. That time has passed. It could be realizing that they're no longer the same. I know for me, if I may, I'll say it this way. There are certain people who have passed on your side. Actually, I don't think I've ever said this to you, so this may be new to you. But your grandma Fallon, when she passed, she was a phenomenal woman, and I learned so much about life through her. And do I go back and think about wishing to have had more moments and appreciated more moments with her? Of course, I do. But when she was declining in health, and I saw her when she was in hospice, and I saw her at home, part of me wish I never saw her that way, because for a long time that was the image that I had in my head. And that's where I say that I choose now to think about the positives and think of the good memories. And there was a couple of times that we would, have videos of her like playing with the dogs, and I have videos of us going out to lunch together, and we've had many, many stories of spontaneous adventures with her. And so I choose to hold on to those memories versus keeping the image that I had in my head of when I saw her on the hospice bed.
Yeah.
And so now I've moved, and you can call me or call it whatever you want, but I don't need, and that's why at times I haven't gone to funerals, or I haven't gone to wakes, or gone to just seeing someone who's declining, still alive but declining. Most of the time it's because I've made the peace already, and there's not much more for me to say or do other than pray. But also, selfishly, I don't want to see them in that state. I don't want that to be the last memory that I have of them. I don't want to think of them that way. You know your dad is my best friend, one of my best friends. And it could be funny to say that because, there's always that stereotype of in-laws, but her dad is my absolute best friend. As he's aged, not that he's old, maybe it's a little negligence there, but not negligence, what's the word? When you don't want to admit something's happening.
I don't know.
Okay, anyways. Not that...
Oh, denial?
Denial, thank you.
Denial.
Didn't even start with an N. So, it could be denial, but as he's aged, I do see him in a different way. Mm-hmm. Not to be disrespectful, not to say he can't do things, but there are things that he can't do anymore. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's difficult to go through that change, and I can only imagine for you because you're his daughter and his only child. But I remember when I first met him, and when we first started dating, just I saw that man like on such a high pedestal because of everything he taught me, especially in the outdoor industry. Now, seeing him just advance in age and not be able to do as much as he did when we first started dating and when we first started hunting together, that is a hard transition for me because it's an end I see coming that I'm not ready for. Mm-hmm. And so now what I do is appreciate the moments daily and talk to him as much as I can and listen to him as much as I can. That way, God forbid anytime soon, but that way if that day comes tomorrow or that day comes soon, I can continue to live without that regret because I made that time and I appreciated him and I lived with him and we just did life together.
Yeah.
And it's the same feeling for your mom.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same feeling for my parents, for my siblings, for our close friends. Like there's a lot of people in my life that I have that feeling for, that I have those feelings about, that I just, if something were to happen today, I can say we had great times, we had bad times, we had times of tears, there was just an emotional roller coaster, but that is life. And if you're not feeling all of these different emotions with the people in your life, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, then
are you having those
are you having fruitful relationships? But yeah, I guess that is, are you living, but are you having those fruitful relationships really? That is the question, that is the answer there. So yeah, for me, I just want to remember people when remember all those times, remember all those things.
I want to touch on a few things because you mentioned like people having regrets and really feeling that emotion, and I've definitely noticed you can tell those who have been around the people and been there and prioritizing them and being in their lives, and those who don't. So with my grandparents in all different forms, you suddenly see people who you haven't seen in years, or it's super rare, and they want to be active and helping with everything they can during this decline. And that's something, my mom with my grandparents 24/7, they lived down the street, she was there every day, took me there every day. I definitely have no regrets with my grandma and grandpa. Even my grandma Fallon, I always prioritize them, and my parents taught me to do that, especially, which is what we do with Rhaegar now. We make sure they get to see him every single day in some form. And you can really tell those that haven't done that, because when it is near the end, they're like jumping in to do everything they can to make themselves feel better. You can see it's definitely not to, it's to help everyone, but it's so they don't have that guilt and they can appreciate the time because it's almost over. Which is something I've really noticed.
And that's the hard part, because it's not to call out people, but it just shows and highlights the complexities of different relationships and different people in life. And I choose I don't want to be that person. I want to help while they're alive. There's a saying in Spanish that says, aprovechame mientras estoy vivo, porque ya que estoy muerto ya pa' qué. Meaning, sometimes the words don't always translate correctly, but basically what the translation is, live, appreciate me, that's the word, appreciate me while I'm alive, because when I'm dead, what for? Like,
Yeah.
spend time with me while I'm alive, because once I'm dead, you can't. It's not
Yeah.
the same anymore. And so and that's probably a selfish thing to say, but I don't want to be the person who, at the time of someone's passing or getting close to someone's passing, to be the person that now all of a sudden wants to jump in and amend things, and for my own
Yeah.
selfishness or my own guilt.
Yeah, and if you think about it, so you said you don't want to see them in that state because you saw Grandma Fallon, and
Yeah.
I've seen most of my family members in that state due to the declining health. I mean, grotesquely saying, I saw both of my grandparents being carried out, but in the bag, which is hard to see, but you always remember that. And I even distinctly remember seeing my grandma, not Grandma Fallon. I call the other one Grandma. Grandma Fallon is Grandma Fallon, for clarification, because she lived in Fallon. But I remember walking into her room and she's kind of hunched up, at the bed. And she had cancer, so we were taking care of her. We just didn't know when the passing would be. She was about to be on hospice. And I was like, do you want something to drink, Grandma? And I remember her just sitting there, like, barely able to talk. And it's a hard memory for me. Yes, I remember all the other great things, but I also remember those last few moments. And I choose to have those memories over not, because I'm trying not to be selfish, because I want to be there to help them and make them as comfortable, and not scared, because if people start fleeing when you find out you're going to die, that stresses them out too. So I remember her teaching me how to make the fudge, because she had just finished chemo and it weakens you so much. And fudge, you have to stir and stir and stir and hold this heavy pot. And I wasn't doing it right. And she took the spoon from me, and the struggle I remember her distinctly not able to stir this. She's like, do it like this, but harder. And so she's like trying to hold the pot up, and I'm like having to hold it up for her because she just couldn't do that. And that's what she's done her whole life. Like, she cooked for everyone every day, every Sunday. The whole family came over, which is why we do family dinners on Sunday now, continuing that tradition. And it's so hard to see them in that declining state. But also, for me personally, I just choose to kind of deal with those memories because I want to be there to help them. But if you think of those who don't have those good memories because they didn't prioritize their time, that's the only memories they're going to have.
Yeah. Is
when they just finally stepped in when they are declining.
Yeah, and that's rough.
Which is hard.
That's rough. I would say, because you willingly chose to, knowing that your grandparents were on the decline, knowing that your grandparents were not looking the healthiest, right? You chose to still go and spend time with them, and I respect you for that. Is that something I can do? I believe so. Is it something that's going to be very, very difficult for me? Like, if we're talking about your parents, my siblings, our immediate family, if we're talking about that, I would say yes. Mm-hmm. I know earlier I said that I've never cried at a funeral, and I forgot to say this. I've thought about it. I'm not gonna lie, it's entered my mind, especially when it's this kind of like there's a funeral or something like that, or someone's passed, how I would handle my parents passing. Because the I guess the unwritten rule of the world is that you outlive your parents.
Well,
right?
That's the goal.
And I would hope that's their goal.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to, I love my parents though. But,
yeah.
I would hope, I would think that that's their goal. That's my goal for Rhaegar. Maybe that's what I should say.
I couldn't even imagine.
I want Rhaegar to outlive us.
I definitely would like him to beat me.
But, it's just something that I'll spend a little bit of time thinking about just because of the season or the situation we're in. But I don't try to think about it too much because I don't want to think about it, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so the times that I do, I realize that that's going to be a big test for me because my dad is my absolute hero. Your dad is one of my best friends, but my dad is my absolute hero. And I cherish my moments with him way more now than I did before. Mm-hmm. I've gotten the man into cold plunging. We cold plunge pretty much daily together. Yeah. And so that's a cool memory that I will always be able to carry with me. And I'm just very grateful for it because I know right now if something were to happen, God forbid, but if something were to happen to either of my parents, I can move forward knowing that I love them, that I spent time with them daily, that I talk to them almost daily, that that I just lived, that I lived, and that we shared memories and did life together. And so the lessons that they've taught me, a lot of the lessons are the lessons that I want to teach Rhaegar. And vice versa. You have lessons from your parents that we're combining them and implementing them and going from there, and how we raise our family. But overall, I'll say that is, aside from you, aside from our son, my parents, my siblings, that is definitely one that I try not to think about a lot, because that's a hard one for me.
I feel like we think about it. We've talked about priorities and things we do in our marriage and stuff, and that's just a priority that we have mutually with all of our family because of the loss we've experienced and he's experienced through me. Is we are always intentional with our time, and that's why we moved back to Nevada, to be intentional with our time. We didn't want to lose any more time with our parents, because we know now how fragile life is and how quickly you can lose someone. So that's even just in daily conversation. We had an interruption during this podcast, and I had a tone with my dad, and I immediately regret it. After this, I'll go down and say I love you and apologize for being rude. And it's like a daily thing. Even like, you get annoyed with little things.
Yeah.
You want to critique certain things and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, most of the time those things don't matter. And
Agreed.
We are very intentional about holding our tongue and just moving on, taking a breath and moving on. And I think that's really important, that we do prioritize not being so quick to anger or getting annoyed, and realizing they did so much for us. They've raised us.
Yeah.
And we are who we are today because of our parents.
Yeah.
And now we are going to be having that with Rhaegar, passing that down and taking all the stuff that they've prepared us with. And we know how hard it is to be a parent. So, especially like now, and I think it's just really important to see how our priorities have changed and how we're super intentional with our time, especially since moving back, because of those experiences.
Correct. I agree. And I appreciate you adding that, because it just gives your perspective, and it gives a different perspective. But overall, we just know that, we've been asked before. We've moved once. Is that something that we would consider in the future? And the answer is, I'm always open to it. It's a possibility. We really enjoyed our time in Texas. We really enjoyed the life we built and we're building there. And that's, I think, what we miss the most, is just our routine, our the environment we had, created, and the church we were attending, and all the, just overall the whole experience of Texas. We enjoyed it, and we miss it. But right now, we know that the most important thing is to have Rhaegar grow up with his grandparents. He is the first grandchild of both sets. And so I know at first there was that hesitation for me, and I'll be transparent. I think I've spoken about it here, and there was that hesitation at first to move back, just because of what we knew we were leaving. But the second we all had our first Sunday family dinner, and I think it was our second weekend back, all that was gone, because we've been consistent every single Sunday since then, minus when we went on vacation. We've all gotten together and broken bread together and spent time together. And you can see, like, now that Rhaegar is recognizing people more, the joy he gets when he sees both sets of grandparents is all I need to see to know that at the end of the day, you can make more money, you can, do different things, try different things. You can do a lot of things. Yeah. But it should not come at the sacrifice of your priorities and what's important to you. And for us, it's family. It could be different for you, and that's totally fine. For us right now, we know our priority is being closer to family, so that way Rhaegar can grow up with them, and his grandparents can enjoy him and love him and just be a part of his upbringing. So very grateful, very blessed, and we're excited. We're excited to be back.
Yeah, with good lessons learned that we are taking on full force for our family now. And I think it's just good perspective for us to have. And I'm glad, even though it's hard dealing with those death and stuff. I'm
Yeah.
glad that we've been kind of shaken in that way, so we have this perspective and can appreciate life at such a younger age. Instead, you go a lot of years to not acknowledging that. So we're lucky we get to acknowledge it now.
Agreed. Well, I mean, should we get into our topic of the podcast today, because that was pretty heavy to
Yeah.
to even start off. No, I'm just kidding. We actually did have a different topic that we were going to discuss, but the conversation that we were having just was flowing really well, and I didn't want to stop it. I think that it's very important. This is a topic that we were going to plan on discussing later on anyways, and just given the circumstances of things that are happening in our lives right now, I think it's very fitting for us to talk about it now. So one thing I do want to do that we didn't do at the very beginning is our peaks and valleys. So we can wrap it up with that, and then I don't know, I think you mentioned that you had a scripture that you wanted to share, so I don't know if you want to...
That was more for the topic, so
okay,
it's okay.
Fair enough. So
yeah,
we can save that.
We'll save those rough scriptures that stab us where it counts for the next topic, which is going to be boundaries, which is kind of exciting. Hard topic to talk about, for sure.
It is a hard topic, but I think it's a very necessary topic. I've definitely learned boundaries more the older I've gotten. And the phrase, mind your business, I have a whole different correlation to that set of words now than I had when I was little.
Okay, I gotta read a verse then. Hang on. Because you said that. There's one I have, which I wasn't gonna read it, but now I'm going to because it's so good. So this is Galatians 6:5. For every man shall bear his own burden. So there you go. It's exactly what you just said, but from the Bible. So there's a little preview of what's to come.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. So go ahead. Tell me what's your peak and valley of this last week?
My valley is going to be the funeral, and it's a sad reason. But also, Rhaegar and I are sick. He got me sick. I don't know where he got sick, but he gave me a cold, and I'm feeling it. I haven't been sick in a while.
I'll say, though, if it is a cold, I mean, you can see it's a stuffy nose. It could be allergies. I mean, with the season is changing here.
I had to vacuum his nose yesterday.
Yeah, but I know I'm having kind of like a stuffy nose from allergies, so it could be that, because I didn't sense like he had a fever or anything like that. But where I was going with that is if it is a cold, he's handling it like a champ. I mean, he'll cry here and there, and we think it's mainly because of his teeth coming out. But other than that, he's doing really well.
Yeah, no,
still a happy
he's
baby.
tough. Yeah, it's definitely not a valley for him.
Yeah,
he's just loving life right now. So being sick and the funeral, but also related to that is just seeing all my family members. That's definitely been the peak of the week, because I've gotten to spend time with family members that live in different states that I rarely get to see, and they've all gotten to meet Rhaegar, which has been really fun, and it's just been a joy getting to see him, because he loves people. I've said it many times on this podcast already, so he is just happy as can be being handed off to all these different people, and it's just great seeing them interact. And I'm a young cousin of the family, so
you're one of the youngest.
Yeah, so a lot of my cousins have already had kids, so it's like another round.
Yeah.
So it's like a new baby that's totally off compared to the timing of all the other cousins.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see, because one, he's meeting his side of the family, your side of the family. He's meeting his family from your side of the family. There we go. But he's just so happy to see everyone and meet everyone. And the one common denominator the one comment we've received by multiple people is, I love his eyes. Yeah, he's got big eyes, and his teeth coming out. His
cheeks.
Yep, he's at that adorable phase for sure. And so, no, I love it. I appreciate you sharing that. Let me see. Peak and valley for me this week. I'll say my valley definitely was similar to what you're saying in terms of the sickness. I was sick. I think I mentioned this last week. I think I had some bad water I had a stomach bug in Mexico the last 2 days there. And
it's the cold plunging in the pool.
It could have been that. But anyways, I had a stomach bug, and so I just have had a stomach ache, and has been, not to go too much information, but it's just been bad. We'll just say that. Tummy issues. And I've had it for about a week. Finally, I went to the doctor, and they gave me some medication. He confirmed that I had a stomach bug, or I drank bad water, drank something bad, and so I feel better. Not that my appetite went away while I was sick, but it definitely just wasn't really I chose not to eat at times because I guess that is me saying that I didn't have the appetite.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I feel a lot better. I have more energy now, and I'm just thankful that the medication has worked. And I finished it, I think, a couple days ago. So
It
now
was gross, though. I thought you were going to say that was your valley, was
No.
the nasty medicine.
It was one of the, I don't even know how to describe it, but the second one, because I had to take 2 different antibiotics, the second I took one of them, it was just like that really dry, really just, I don't know if this even makes sense, but just like sour taste. It was, there's no words to
It's
describe
like
what
every
it was.
prenatal medicine.
It was terrible. I had to put a little sip of water in my mouth, pop the pill in, and then, swallow it and then drink some more water and to not taste it because it was bad.
He normally takes pills so easily, too.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was like me, like, okay, preparing to take this pill,
it was bad.
I knew he was struggling. Like, it was bad.
It was bad.
He normally can just down him pretty quickly.
Yeah, so that was definitely the valley there. The peak, let me think. Well, let me add one more valley, just for accountability purposes, because last week I said that I was going to start my routine again, and I was going to be disciplined, and I was going to go do the gym and go to the gym and, start working out again. I have not done that, and I need to start that. I've walked more, so I can say that. So it's a start, but it's not where I want to be. And so I need to get back to that, and I need to stop feeling sorry for myself. I need to stop coming up with excuses. I just need to do it. And so that is my commitment this week. Y'all are going to hold me accountable to it, so I'll do a touch point on that next week.
We got good groceries, though.
We did get good groceries.
There is nothing bad in the fridge, so there's nothing to be temptation.
Agreed. Except for cookies. We did get a box of cookies.
You should have gotten the cookies as for my dad.
Hey. Little by little. Okay, little by little. But let's see, my peak, I would say, is just, I said it last time, but I'm really enjoying Rhaegar's age right now. He's so giggly. He's so happy. He wants to, he's exploring. He wants to be put down, but if he wants to be held, he'll let you know. And he's so independent is what I love.
He is.
I know, like, when there's a 10 and 12 year age gap between my siblings, and when they were Rhaegar's age, I remember them still, like, binky all the time, and just kind of like, if you gave them their binky, they were satisfied, they were happy. Rhaegar is not a binky baby. Like, he will grab it, but he plays with it. He'll, like, put it in his mouth and then he'll pop it out.
Rips it out.
And
Makes a little pop
it just
noise.
makes a little pop noise with it. And so it's amazing, and it's a blessing to be able to see his personality develop. And so I'm just really enjoying that moment, really enjoying those moments, I should say, and really enjoying my time with him. So that's definitely my peak. And with you too, of course.
Well, thank you.
Of course,
I agree. I mean, he's just growing so much, and he's so smart. I know probably every parent says, "Oh, my kid's so smart," but he was stacking his Pokemon stuffed animals in his crib today to climb out because I wasn't grabbing him faster. And I'm like, what are you doing? I just let him do it because I wanted to see if he'd figure it out, because the poop thing, like diaper thing.
The diaper bag, yeah. The diaper genie.
Diaper genie is right there on the side. So he was like tapping that, leaning over, tapping it, and just stacking his Pokemon. He has 3 in there, and he started climbing up. I'm like, I'm impressed. Like, let me see if you can actually do it. I'll be there to catch you, but I just wanted to see if he figured it out, and he's getting pretty darn close. So he is just at that stage where he is absorbing everything, trying everything, testing us with everything, and really growing.
It's a fun time. It's a fun time. We're getting close to the walking stage. We're getting closer and closer.
Can't wait. He's going to be running around in circles. Like, I'm so excited.
Yeah, looking forward to that. So yeah, in case you were wondering, okay, because Lynn mentioned his Pokemon. In case you were wondering, we gave him the 3 starters as soon as he started crawling. And, we had Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle. And then we did the video of seeing which one he picked. And to my heart's delight, he picked Charmander.
He did.
And the moment he picked him, I mean, you can see it in the video, I screamed so loud. And
Yeah,
he was just kind of like, he tapped him, and he's like looking at me. And it was just such a happy moment.
Yeah, you should go check it out. It's on his Instagram, which is connected to our Instagram.
Yes.
So you'll see it. It's adorable.
Yeah, you'll see it there. And he, picked Charmander, and he has not changed his mind. Like, we'll put all 3 in there. He goes for Charmander first, and he'll play with them, and then he'll kind of throw him, and then he'll go and crawl to it and pick him up again, and then it's a great time to see that. And so, very that was a bucket list for me. I'm not gonna lie. Once I had a baby, I knew that I wanted to do something like that. And when we were thinking about doing like the Harry Potter, him picking his house. But Lynn wants to wait until he's older and he knows a little bit more about it, and then we go
Or
from
we're
there.
just forcing him to be a Slytherin.
We're both Slytherins.
You know, it would be like the Malfoys. I'll be Narcissa. I love her.
Yes. I don't know if I could be Lucius. I like his name.
Don't be him.
I don't know if I could be
He turned
Lucius.
into such a coward. That's another conversation for another day. But you can be a Snape.
There we go. Fair enough. All right. Well, cool, Lynn. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for a great conversation today.
This was a good on-the-fly conversation because we didn't get into our normal one, but I love where this conversation went. And you're right, it does important. Relate to, what we're going through currently. And I think that's important to talk about, things we're experiencing in the moment too.
Agreed. And so we hope that, our hope is always that what we share with you brings value to your life, that it helps you build better and more fruitful relationships with people in your life. Don't forget, I know we've been bad about this, we haven't mentioned this, but don't forget, if there's something that you're going through or something that you would like us to pray for you for, please don't hesitate. Reach out through our Instagram at NV Growth Podcast. NV as in the letter N, V. It'll be in our description. It'll be in the link will be there. But send us a message. Let us know what we could pray for you for, and we'd gladly do that. We'll gladly do that. Ask us questions if there's something that resonated with you in this podcast, or if there's a question that maybe you were curious about that we didn't ask each other, that we didn't get a chance to answer, or you want to know more about something else. Again, don't hesitate to ask us those questions. We want to get to a point where we are answering our audience's questions in the episodes in the podcast.
Yeah, what you guys can find helpful also.
Yeah. We want to make sure that we are serving you guys and helping you, again, grow those fruitful and more impactful and stronger relationships. Yeah. So, all right. Anything else from your end right now?
I think we're good. I hope you guys got a lot of this episode. We were a little more vulnerable about this, and it's stuff we're experiencing right now, but I think it's just an important topic to talk about, so I'd love to hear any discussions or thoughts that you guys have too.
Agreed. All right. Well, as always, thank you for your time. Thank you for spending time with us. We hope you go out there and shatter your limits and ascend. Let's get after it.
Bye, guys.
Bye.